so excited because the sets of issues that Dr. Black raises are issues that are so important to this region in so many different ways. The notion of the relationship between public and private landscapes, between the role of nature and the role of culture, and the practice of preservation in each can be retold time and time again from landscapes throughout the region, the Appalachian Trail, various rails to trail projects, the sites in Chambersburg, the Adams County Fruit Belt, and your work's really given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce our esteemed group of panelists, representing the best and brightest of both our national and state governments. Please let me introduce first and foremost, or first and equalmost, Mr. Greg Goodell. Greg is the Chief of Museum Services at Gettysburg National Military Park and the Eisenhower National Historic Site. He came to Gettysburg after a long and distinguished career in public service and in preservation, everywhere from the National Archives to a variety of state and local positions, and he holds degrees from the Johns Hopkins University and from the University of Maryland. In his current position as Chief of Museum Services at the Military Park, he has the responsibility of managing daily activities associated with both parks' rich archival and museum collections, a position that he's arrived at after working his way up through the ranks at Gettysburg. To his right is Mr. Mark Schaefer, who is a historic preservation specialist with the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania's Historical and Museum Commission, where he has served for nearly 20 years. He's worked in the State Preservation Office, reviewing and commenting on the potential effects of proposed projects on significant cultural resources, including both the Gettysburg National Military Park itself, as well as surrounding areas and the broader South Mountain region. Prior to his appointment at Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission, he was an archaeological consultant at the University of Delaware Center for Archaeological Research, at Jefferson Patterson Park and Museum in St. Leonard, Maryland, as well as a career in the private sector at consulting services. He has a bachelor's degree from our sister institution, Mansfield University of Pennsylvania, and a master's degree in American Studies from Pennsylvania State University. So there are a couple of microphones to the right and left there. So if you have some questions for our panelists, please step up and let's start talking. Let's start the call. Oh, it's so shy. Please, I have some too. As my students can tell you, I talk entirely too much as kids.
I'll figure out the problem in a second. But Brian, you talked about all these different ages. What do you all feel panelists would be the next age of Gettysburg and of military parks in general, or even in that sense, I think it counts a lot of national parks. But what is the next stage of national parks, especially military parks, as far as their idea of preservation?
That was deliberate, Brian. We didn't like to hear it.
I've talked too much already. I like the way you asked that question in particular because although arbitrary to some extent, those eras do help us organize the way things have happened. And by doing so, the obvious question is, what's going to happen? And a number of those categories you noticed were open-ended. I think we have to clearly agree that this the work with authenticity is going to continue into the future. And now we have related to that something that borders on ethics and what it reverts back to some of what the GBMA did in about the first 30 years of preservation, where they actually looked at behavior and actions on the battlefield as part of what fell into the purview of preserving the sacred. In other words, you had to act a certain way. You had to dress a certain way. And I think in some of the discourse that we see going on now, at least at Gettysburg, where the patriotism is really wedded to the preservation, you see a lot of that coming up. And And then, of course, there are tons of funding issues related to how any of these parks move forward and what kind of progress we see in the future for them. When we look at something like the Mission 66 era of park development, I think we really see what a different era the United States was at in general economically in the 1950s, where it could expand and build to such a degree at these places. That doesn't seem to be where we're at. We could also say something similar about the New Deal, where the CCC got involved in a lot of these parks and worked to develop them. That doesn't necessarily seem to be where we are, even though some people thought that would be a form of economic stimulus over the last year or so, that would have been a good way to put people back to work. That doesn't seem to be happening. So I think we're at a point where we need to really defend and protect these places, maybe against a lack of funds, and to begin to really streamline what's important and how we need to continue to help them. Now, something that I hope the others will talk about too, the joining, I had it on a slide, but I didn't talk about it all, right here again, the joining of public and private again is also a big part of this. I hope that Greg, I didn't do my long introduction, which would have included Greg, who was so instrumental in me gathering the material over quite a few visits to the archives. He is housed now in the new visitor center, a wonderful facility, wonderful archive that was built, correct me if I'm wrong, but with private funds. And it was a cooperative endeavor with the National Park Service, who basically had the stuff, and then someone else who had the funds and could package it, maybe better than the National Park Service did. I find, I'd love to hear what each of you think, I find the jury's still out on whether that's a totally good thing or not. Some people call it commercializing. But you go in and there's a real process to visiting the museum now. When I used to take student groups, they didn't know where to go first. And in some ways that was lovely. You just kind of wandered around the battlefield. But now you go there first, you watch a movie, you pay admission, you watch a movie, and then you kind of go like you're at a ride. Maybe that's where visitation's going at these really big parks. So I'm sorry, that's a long-winded answer. I'll let anybody contribute more if you'd like.
Yeah, I would have to agree with Dr. Black that speaking about the public-private partnership with the new museum, the jury still is out on that. I was out in a national park in the far west a couple of years ago, and I was speaking to an employee out there, and I was saying, yeah, I'm from Pennsylvania, and they're running this experimental sort of thing at Gettysburg, whereby there's this public-private partnership, which is designed to create a pretty badly needed new facility in which to both exhibit artifacts, tell the story of Gettysburg, and also tell the story of the larger Civil War and Gettysburg's place within it. And the lady said to me, oh, that's a terrible idea. And just as Brian said, she said it's going to be commercialized. We hate to see that happen. It's definitely a step in the wrong direction. So a lot of people do feel that way. But I would suggest to you all that if it were not for that private infusion of funding, there would be no new museum and visitor center. The artifact collection would continue to deteriorate. And personally, in my opinion, I feel that the museum does a pretty good job of not just providing an orientation to the Battle of Gettysburg, but also placing the battle within the larger context of the Civil War. And all of this, I think, is designed to enhance the visitor's experience. And in my view, so far, it's been kind of successful, although I will be the first to agree that the jury is still out.
Well, I think that the points that both Brian and Mark have made are very accurate. This is part of a larger trend that's going on in the National Park Service. The Historic Sites Act gives the National Park Service the authority to enter cooperative agreements to the benefit of resources and visitation within the National Park system. And this is part and parcel of that, just one example of many. You go to places like Statue of Liberty, you go to Mount Rushmore, all of them have foundations that support and help maintain operations, collections, park facilities, etc. So this is actually part of a larger trend, and Brian alluded to this a little bit in his comments just a moment ago. When we are simply, as an agency, responding to a need that is being a need that is obvious to us from visitors who are looking for a better experience, and we are trying as best as we can through these various avenues that Congress allows us to take to make that experience more meaningful for people, have better access to facilities, have better access to collections that the public owns through museum exhibits, et cetera, et cetera. So you're going to see this a lot more in various parks, especially, I believe, those of larger size.